Hello YouTube friends, Dr. Teresa Ulrich here again. Thanks so much for joining me in continuing the series on comparing large seahorses versus dwarf seahorses. If you haven't had a chance to view the previous episodes, I've linked them below underneath this video in case you want to go back and visit them. Today we're talking in part 6 about seahorse foods. Beginning with larger seahorses. First, I want to talk about wild-caught seahorses. Yes, it's still possible to acquire wild-caught seahorses from certain vendors, but what you should know is if you do invest in wild-caught seahorses, you are going to have to provide live food, namely appropriate size shrimp. Some shrimp species that are typically fed to larger seahorses are sometimes called ghost shrimp, glass shrimp, or even grass shrimp. One problem with using these type of shrimp is that they are often too large for seahorses to eat. So when you make a purchase, only the smaller sizes will get eaten, and you'll either have to try to breed more from the shrimp that you have left over, or you'll just have a loss. The other kind of shrimp that wild-caught seahorses will respond to are mysis or mysid shrimp. These shrimp are smaller and usually the right size for seahorses to eat, but they are expensive and very hard to replenish. It will be impossible to keep a live culture running to keep up with the pace of how fast wild-caught seahorses would eat these shrimp. As you can imagine, to acquire shrimp of the right size and the right amount, it can become very costly. In comparison, captive bred seahorses are a little bit easier. Most people who sell captive bred seahorses have already trained the seahorses to eat frozen mysis shrimp. So really, the only thing you have to do in preparing food for captive bred seahorses is to defrost the food or the shrimp appropriately, rinse it, and prepare it in a way that you can feed it to your seahorses in the aquarium. I personally like to use a feeding station for seahorses. That prevents the shrimp from moving all around the aquarium and making a mess. Also, by using a single location, seahorses know right where to go to get their food when they're hungry. Finally, the feeding station is really easy to clean and keep up, so if I'm only placing food in the feeding station, you don't have to worry about bacteria accumulating and entering seahorse systems and causing them to become sick. So, all in all, feeding and caring for captive bred seahorses is easier and less costly. Dwarf seahorses are a different matter. It really doesn't matter if you are speaking about wild-caught or captive-bred dwarf seahorses. Both of them require live food daily. Now, I have heard some stories, they're more like myths or rumors, that some people have successfully trained their dwarf seahorses to eat frozen food. But I've never been able to do that myself, and I certainly wouldn't count on them doing that if you decide to move forward with acquiring dwarf seahorses. Some of the foods that you can offer live to dwarf seahorses, most commonly in the aquarium, are newly hatched brine shrimp. I say in the aquarium because in the wild or in nature, dwarf seahorses really eat things like copepods and other small shrimps. They don't eat baby brine shrimp, but they do accept it in the home aquarium. There are different kinds of brine shrimp, those that are decapsulated or have the shell removed, or those that you just hatch out with the shell on. There is some debate about the benefits of hatching only decapsulated brine shrimp. Some believe that the brine shrimp with the shells left on it contain sleeping or dormant versions of hydroids. Hydroids are like a type of stinging jellyfish in its free form, and when it reproduces, it creates networks in the tank, usually in the corners, and looks sort of like spider webs. Those spider webs can turn pink as they capture the free-floating Artemia or newly hatched brine shrimp. The hydroids do feed on that brine shrimp, but one of the big problems with that is because the brine shrimp are captured and still moving, they still attract the dwarves. So the dwarves try to eat the brine shrimp in this stinging network. When they ingest these hydroids, it becomes very painful as they pass through the dwarf system, and sometimes you can even see food and stinging cells exit from the dwarf seahorses after they've eaten some brine that was caught in the hydroids. As you can imagine, this is very dangerous for the dwarf seahorses, eventually fatal, and definitely fatal for any young that would be in the aquarium. I don't know how true it is that hydroids come from brine shrimp with the eggs on. I know in the past I have had hydroids many years ago when I kept dwarf seahorses before captive bred versions were available. But I did recently have a batch of dwarf seahorses from the wild that were pre-treated, and I did feed both decapsulated and regular brine shrimp and did not have any hydroid problems. One other option for feeding dwarf seahorses is marine copepods. Again, these animals are living, and they are more like the natural foods that the dwarves would eat in a nature environment. Unfortunately, copepods reproduce very slowly in compared to how fast dwarf seahorses can eat them. So it would be impossible to keep enough cultures of copepods going to be the only sole food for dwarves. Actually, marine copepods would be better as a supplement to hatched brine shrimp, newly hatched baby brine shrimp. So all in all, you can see that keeping dwarf seahorses is a bit more challenging when it comes to the food. You have to be able to provide live food to the dwarves every single day. Comparing to the large seahorses, they are definitely more work. Larger seahorses, if they are wild caught, can be expensive and very difficult to find the right size shrimp for. Captive bred seahorses are much easier to prepare food. I hope you're finding this information useful. If you are, I would appreciate it if you would hit the like button. Make sure you don't miss part 7 of the next installment by subscribing to Cowfish Pro. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.